Ladies and gentlemen, this presentation is brought to you by The Greatness Continues LLC. And you are now tuned into the greatest conversations, starring Greasy Teutons, Shaka the Wise, Sensei J, the Masked Man, Big Z, and your host, D. Jones. Once again, you are tuned into the greatest conversations.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at it. You literally knows what it says. You've already read it. Just by looking at it, you've already read it. But
Yeah,
if you
your
look
brain
at it
has
and then
already
you literally,
read.
if I look at this and it says buttermilk and then in my head I say buttermilk, why am I doing that?
Yeah, you're just reassuring. You're literally reassuring what you just said.
Yeah, your brain is
But like,
already
what if
told
you
that
like?
it says
Okay, so
buttermilk.
you identify something that you don't have to really read because you just know it, right? But like the rest of the sentence, you have to read. So I feel like you need the whole context.
Well, but you're saying you have to read it, but you're reading it.
Yeah, you're assuming.
You are reading
I get what
it.
you're saying. You're saying, assumingly for the story, when you're reading word for word, you don't know what the next word is.
Yeah.
So you have to, I guess, say it in your head. But what we're saying is, you do. Like,
Yeah, you
if
are doing it.
you already. It's hard because maybe you may not have done it. But if you just like open up a line and you just glance at it before your brain says that first word in the first sentence, you scan it with your eyes. You just read it.
Mm-hmm.
You just read it.
That's why. So technically, you shouldn't even be reading word by word.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what some people say.
I got good at doing that in
First sentence and the
school
last
when there
sentence.
was something that I really wasn't that interested in, because I was really good at like writing essays and stuff with English class.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like glance through a chapter in a book and literally just pick out all the
keywords.
Bro, yeah, that's
and like the filler, just kind of like, okay, well this happens if I need to talk about that, then maybe I can go back, but
Dude, you want to know what's crazy? What's really helped me cut back on my sub-vocalization has been watching sub-anime.
Yeah, because I don't have time to read it back to myself.
Right, exactly.
yeah, like that's true. I literally live with subtitles on, and people are like, why? I'm like, I don't know. It just,
I see what you're saying. You put it like that.
it's just a thing. Like,
Yeah.
really, I
You don't
watch
have
the
time to
I
show.
don't say that.
Like, I can see all the words out of my peripheral. You know what I mean?
When you're
Like,
reading something like,
But when
just
I
by
read a book,
looking
I
at
do that.
yeah, a lot of people do. Like sub-vocalization, the majority of people sub-vocalize. Because the reason you sub-vocalize is when you're learning to read, you read out loud.
Yeah.
And that's why you start to internalize it.
so if you're trying to perfect your like skill, your speed reading, is that something you have to be aware of?
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because like I got tested. Did they test you guys for that kind of thing in school or stuff like that? In like high school or something like that? They tested us for that in like high school, like to see your speed and proficiency on like reading
Yeah.
in your head and like that.
Books that be
And,
like,
like,
it should take me 5 minutes.
I
to
mean,
read.
actually,
No.
everyone, you do get tested on it, but you know what they call it in school? They call it critical thinking and reading comprehension.
Yeah.
Because they have those little books with a timer on the back that says like, this should be a 5-minute.
Because they straight up told us like, we're about to test Hawkins, and we're like,
Because that's why when you took,
go. So everybody's just
when
like,
you took the reading comprehension portion, that's why the reading comprehension portion and critical thinking were always timed sections. Because what they were trying to get you to do without telling you is read everything and then
and then
answer
they would ask you
questions.
to write, yeah.
And that's why
To see if you
it was always
Like
a
write a
big chunk
synopsis
with,
on
like,
what you just
3
read.
questions. Like what was it about? What was the
Yeah.
plot? And then you move on to the next story. It's another big ass paragraph of shit to read, and then 3 more questions.
Because when you get really used to sub-vocalizing, you get used to like second guessing yourself because you just read it, but then you're just like, do I really understand what I just read?
So Big Z has a question for you. When did you learn, or who taught you, or how did you figure out
about sub-vocalization?
Yeah.
Did you just constantly just keep reading and just naturally just got good at it?
Was it like in school, or did someone tell you?
No, it's gonna be funny. So this is actually one of those little late night sessions where you can't go to sleep
And you just
Google it. And so I like Google. I was like, do people like I forget what I said, but it's essentially like, do people like say the words out loud when they read, or do people say words in their head when they read? And then it's like, oh yeah, that's called sub-vocalization. A lot of people do it. I'm like, it actually limits the speed at which you read, and it limits the comprehension, because if you think about it, you can read at a much faster pace than you can talk. So if you're trying to talk along as you read,
there's a separate.
Yeah, there's only a set pace you can read at. Because I read a lot of books.
I do that while you're talking.
You sub-vocalize while people talk?
Playing the conversation in my head, yeah.
Well, that's
like when I'm hearing you right now. Every word you say, I'm hearing it again in my head.
That's just your ears receiving an auditory.
You play it back? Why are you playing it back?
It helps me remember. That's how I've been like a setting. I know what somebody's
Okay, so you're like listening to what we're saying, and then you're like kind of repeating.
Is that how you learn? Is that how you learned at school how to remember? Like when I say it back.
I don't know. Maybe
repeat after me.
Repeat after me.
I mean, definitely, I did that.
Because I might be the thing, because with repeat after me drills, it's like you hear me say it, your brain registers it, and you say it back to them. So yeah, I kind of have the same thing. So if I ask myself, I was like, do foreign speakers, when they speak English, do they hear English or do they hear?
I do that too.
Yeah. And so that's how I'm speaking
different language.
Yeah, because I also like coming up to sub-vocalization, I ran into a bunch of shit, because like. One of the things is like when you're learning a new language, one of the best ways people say that they know they're getting good at the language is when they start dreaming in that language. And for me, I was looking at a lot of people who are considered to be like highly intelligent people are very fast readers. Like they look at something, they skim it, and then they can tell you like what they just did. And then I watched a TED talk about this guy who like can read really fast. He's like the Guinness World Records. But yeah, it's like they group. So what they do is they don't read word from word. They group stuff together. Because when you look at a page, like you know so much stuff.
Context.
Now, yeah, you use context when you're reading. You know so many words and stuff now. Unless
crazy.
you come up to a word that you don't know, where you have to like look up and stuff like that. But you know everything. So all you're literally doing is you have the pieces there, you're putting them together, you're moving on. But when you sub-vocalize, you're like trying to go through everything. It's like, oh yeah, I know what that says. I know what that is. I know what that is.
Maybe that's the problem with society.
And here, when I was a kid, I just thought I was like finessing my way through English class.
And you also
The whole time,
you start getting a big picture of what you're reading, because instead of narrowing in on like the word by word, you can see like, oh, okay. Because things jump out. You get the big, like the overall essence of what you just read jumps out at you more.
Yeah. And that's where I think when I was like, I kind of have a photographic memory. I think that's where that plays, where if someone were to ask me what I just read, my brain pops the whole thing. Except, like, I don't know how other people see it, but I would assume if I read word by word, my brain would just pop up each individual word.
Yeah.
But
like a paragraph pops out, and it's like then the words that I remember get highlighted, and it's like, oh yeah, this.
Your word association goes.
This, yeah.
Because
it's like, okay.
Yeah, well, that's why a lot of like really, I don't want to say really smart people, but a lot of people who are like seen as like intelligent by societal standards are fast readers.
And if you don't know,
I mean, think of like certain games, like we're saying, like subtitle games. Yeah, how there's some games where the text goes by so fast.
You're done. You're tapping.
It's like.
So this was another thing.
Like,
how I noticed that I was getting better at not sub-vocalizing, because I would play games and have the subtitles on. I'm like, why is it going by so slow? Like I literally read that like in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's getting to the point now where I literally.
And Now,
and
also,
skip through like.
Yeah, they already read this.
And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "I'm reading it." Like, it's just
So what are some techniques to improve that skill?
bro, I have a good app that I use. So this app that I use, it's called Elevate, and it's basically like
Do I have that app?
brain. It's like a bunch of games and stuff.
actually.
But there's
I
this
did
certain
download that.
there's this certain game that literally what it does is it determines your words per minute, and then it has like a line of words that just drop down, and you read them, and it asks you questions after a certain amount of words. If you get that right, it increases the words per minute, and it keeps doing that. Each time you get a question right, it keeps going up, keeps going up, keeps going up.
It's actually,
I feel like I heard that.
It was actually I don't want to misquote anybody, but there was an exercise that someone used. I want to say the military, but probably not because I don't want to misquote. But they used to do the subliminal flash game, where almost like that we were talking about, but like to help people, because they're like in a critical moment you don't have time to like scan the room per se. You know, when you walk in a room and you walk out.
To do it again at least. 'Cause you've already done
So
it.
it's like when you walk in a room and you walk out, that's all you got. So what they used to do was they'll show people a configuration of something, like not even like a split second, and then they'll hand them like a box and say, configure this box like you saw in that picture. And then that's what they'll do. They'll be like, I think I saw the blue piece here, and then see this here. And so what that does is they'll do the same thing with words. Like they'll flash a sentence and be like, all right, now arrange those words the way you saw it on the screen. And they'll be like, okay. And then like the first, like for some people who have to like read everything and say it back, they learn real quickly that it's like, okay, I don't have time to say it back. I kind of just have to leave my eyes open and trust my brain. And that helped them a lot with that. I forgot the name of it.
Yeah, I mean that's probably a really good skill. I think for a lot of artists probably, because like, you know, when you're a beginner you probably use a lot of references. But like if you improve that skill, you probably just don't need a reference anymore. You
And it's a skill that a lot of that's why I say a lot of like people who are seen as smart have it, because if you're like going for doctorates, postdoctorates, you're doing a lot of reading, right?
Yeah.
So you have to develop this skill.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, or you're tired.
They don't have time to like sit down really and like read all these chapters and like
Right.
words.
Yeah,
and, like,
you say it and your brain says it and you say it. It's like
It's a lot of effort. But
Like when I was getting my my certificates for my last job, they told me that like the best way, because these books were like super thick, and they said the best way to read it is just read it like a novel. Like don't get caught up on anything. Like you just read it all the way through, and you're gonna retain it the best way that way. So I think that's what they really meant though. Like kind of going into detail on that sub-vocalization.
You just scan the words. I mean, because naturally when you do it, when you get really good at it, naturally words are just gonna glue to your brain. You know, and then your brain's just gonna keep going. Like think of it as like if you read one by one, let's say like your max hold is 10 words, right? If you read a sentence that has 25 words in it or 10 words, then you're maxed out your brain's capacity to hold words. But if you're skimming it and you let your brain naturally just pick up the words that it needs.
It picks up the words that it needs.
Then you have those 10 most important words, and then when someone asks you about what you read,
summarizing it for you to give you the like bulk of what it is that you really need.
Because that's why I think if you're out there and you're listening right now and you're like, I definitely sub-vocalize, and you try to think of ways to cut back on it, I would start by getting a book that you've read already, that you know like what's gonna happen, so that you can just skim it because you've read it already. You know what's gonna happen. You're not stressed about I just read all this and I know what the I just read.
Yeah.
So pick something small, pick something doable, and just skim. You know, use your finger, use like a card or something. Just skim everything. Don't read everything word by word, and then at the end of each like page or each chapter, ask yourself a question.
So
like,
I have a perfect example for you, and that is actors and actresses when they're learning scripts and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Most actors, like, they're not gonna sit there and try and completely study the script perfectly, every single thing word by word, especially depending on how extensive it is. They need to kind of scan through it and get like the major points that, you know, the really hit lines that are gonna make an impact, but then just kind of understand what the rest of the flow of conversation is supposed to go through.
Context.
And that's why a lot of times, you know, you'll be like, that wasn't even scripted. You know, they did that off the top just because they kind of read through and understood, okay, this is what they were going for. In my mind, this is how this breaks down in this situation. Like, I feel like I can portray this better.